$2 million to the man who brings me Mike Tyson's head on a silver plate by Sunday night, Victor said into the phone. The three large men behind him did not move a single muscle as their boss made the call on that cold February morning. It is done, Victor said as he placed the phone down on his desk made of dark wood. The old clock on the wall showed the time was exactly 9:15 in the morning on that dark day in history. Outside the window, the famous Las Vegas Strip was waking up under a weak winter sun that gave no warmth to anyone. Victor turned to his head of security and said, "Make sure every killer in this city knows about the money I am offering." Marcus nodded slowly, but his throat moved up and down like he had just swallowed something very hard and sharp. "You have a problem with my order?" Victor asked as smoke began to rise from the thick brown cigar in his hand. "No, sir. I have no problem at all with what you want me to do today." The office was filled with pictures of famous fights and the smell of money that came from illegal business deals made over many years. Victor blew 3 perfect smoke rings toward the ceiling and watched them float away like the souls of his many enemies. "I built this boxing world with my own 2 hands," Victor said while looking at an old photo from his younger days. Marcus kept his mouth shut tight because he knew that Victor loved to hear himself talk about the old times. And now this punk kid from Brooklyn thinks he can say no to me and walk away like nothing happened at all. The 3 men behind Victor looked at each other fast because they all knew that Mike Tyson was no punk kid. Victor stood up fast, and his fist hit the desk so hard that a glass of water fell over and spilled everywhere. Nobody moved to clean up the mess because nobody wanted to be the next person that Victor decided to hurt badly. "Get out of here and spread the word right now," Victor shouted at his men with spit flying from his thin lips. The 3 men moved fast toward the door like their lives depended on getting out of that room as quickly as possible. Marcus took one last look at Victor before he left, and he saw something that scared him deep down inside. Victor was smiling at the city below like a hungry wolf that had just spotted a lamb walking alone in the woods. The hallway outside the office was cold and quiet, like a tomb where bad things happened when nobody was looking around. Marcus pulled out his phone and began to dial a number that he had promised himself he would never call again. "I need to warn him before it is too late for all of us," Marcus whispered to himself as the phone began to ring. 10 miles away from the casino, a large white house sat quiet and peaceful under the warm morning sun in Henderson, Nevada. Mike Tyson walked slowly down the stairs of his home with his eyes still heavy from a night of very little sleep. His feet made soft sounds on the cold marble steps as he moved toward the kitchen where he could smell fresh coffee. The kitchen was bigger than most houses, and it was filled with every kind of food that money could buy these days. Rosa smiled at Mike as she poured hot coffee into his favorite mug that had a picture of a tiger on it. "Thank you, Rosa. You always know what I need before I even know it myself," Mike said in his high, soft voice. "You need to eat more than just coffee today," Rosa said as she touched his arm like a mother would touch her son. Mike sat down at the counter and watched Rosa crack eggs into a hot pan while birds sang songs outside the window. The phone on the counter started to buzz and shake like a small animal that was trying very hard to escape. Mike looked at the screen but did not know the number, so he let it ring 3 more times before he picked it up. "Who is this, and how did you get my private number that only 5 people in the whole world are supposed to know?" "My name is Marcus, and I work for Victor Marchetti, but I am calling to save your life today, not to end it." Mike's hand squeezed the phone harder, and his eyes became small and dark like storm clouds forming over the desert mountains. Rosa turned around and saw the change in Mike's face, and she knew right away that something very bad was happening now. "Tell me what Victor wants, and tell me fast, because I am losing my patience with people who waste my time." Marcus checked to make sure nobody was watching him before he spoke the words that could get him killed very quickly. "Victor just put a $2 million bounty on your head, and he wants you dead before Sunday night comes around?" Mike jumped up from his seat, and the stool crashed to the ground behind him with a loud sound that made Rosa scream. "Victor thinks he can put a price on my head like I am some kind of animal to be hunted down." Rosa had never seen Mike look like this before, and she was more scared of him now than she was of any news. Mike closed his eyes and took 3 deep breaths, because he had learned long ago that anger without control was pure poison. You need to leave Las Vegas right now because every killer in the city will be looking for you within the hour. I am not running from anyone. Not now and not ever, Mike said with a voice that was calm and cold as ice. Mike walked to the window and stared at the brown desert that stretched for miles and miles beyond his expensive green lawn. Victor made the biggest mistake of his entire life today, and I am going to make sure he knows it very soon. What are you talking about, man? You cannot fight the whole city by yourself. That would be crazy and stupid. Who said I would be fighting by myself? Mike said with a small laugh that made Marcus feel cold all over. Rosa stood frozen in the kitchen with eggs burning on the stove, but she did not care about breakfast anymore. Now, meet me at the old boxing gym on Fremont Street at noon today, and bring anyone you trust with your own life. Marcus could not believe what he was hearing, because this man was walking straight into a trap with his eyes wide open. You must have lost your mind completely because Victor has at least 50 men who would die for that money today. Mike started walking toward the stairs without looking back, and his steps were steady and sure, like a man with a plan. Victor does not know who I really am or what I can do, but he is about to find out the hard way. The line went dead and Marcus stood there in the hallway wondering if he had just signed his own death paper. 3 levels below the Las Vegas Strip, men in dark clothes gathered around expensive cars in a cold parking garage. $2 million is more money than I have seen in my whole miserable life, Tony said while hitting his car with his fist. Danny did the math in his head and figured out how many years he could live like a king with that much money. We split it 6 ways and each man gets over $300,000 for one night of work, someone said from the back. You guys are forgetting one important thing about this job that could get us all killed before we see $1. The other 5 men stopped talking and turned to face Big Sal because he was known for being smart about dangerous work. The target is Mike Tyson, and that man has knocked out more people than all of us have together in our lives. He is just a boxer who punches people in a ring with gloves on and a referee to protect him, Tony said with a laugh. Danny pulled out a silver gun and looked at it like it was the answer to every problem in the whole world. This thing does not care how hard he can punch, Danny said while sliding the magazine back into place with a click. The other men started pulling out their own weapons, and the sound of metal filled the cold underground space like music. Big Sal watched his friends show off their guns and knives, and he felt something bad growing deep inside his stomach. I have heard stories about Tyson that you would not believe, and they do not all happen inside the boxing ring. What kind of stories are you talking about? Because all I know is that he bites ears and acts crazy sometimes. My cousin worked at a club where Tyson came to visit, and he saw things that made him quit his job that same night. The other men moved in closer to hear the story, and the garage seemed to get darker and colder all of a sudden. 3 guys tried to rob Tyson in the parking lot, and my cousin saw the whole thing from the back door window. What happened to the 3 guys who were dumb enough to try and rob the heavyweight champion of the whole world? Nobody knows because they were never seen again, and the police found nothing but blood on the ground the next morning. A heavy silence fell over the group like a wet blanket, and some of the men started to think twice about this job. That is just a scary story that people tell to make themselves feel better about being too scared to do anything real. A young man with hungry eyes stepped forward from the back of the group, where he had been listening to everything quietly. I am not afraid of any man alive, and I will kill Mike Tyson myself if nobody else here has the guts. The older men looked at the young kid, and some saw a brave warrior, while others saw a dead body walking around. That is what I like to hear from the young generation, Tony said as he slapped Ricky hard on the back. Big Sal turned his back on the group and walked toward his car because he wanted no part of this suicide mission. Where are you going, Sal? Are you going to miss out on the biggest payday of your life because of scary stories? I am going home to my wife and kids because I plan to live long enough to see them grow up and have babies. The car drove away and disappeared up the ramp, leaving 5 men standing in a cloud of gray smoke and bad decisions. 5 ways means even more money for each of us, so let Sal go home and cry to his woman, Tony said loudly. I heard Tyson goes to train at the old gym on Fremont Street almost every day around noontime or after. Then we wait outside the gym and catch him when he comes out tired and weak from his workout today, Danny said. The 5 killers began to make their plan while somewhere across the city their target was making plans of his own. The gym on Fremont Street had been standing for 40 years and had trained more champions than any other gym in Nevada history. Teddy opened the door to his gym at 10 in the morning like he had done every single day for the last 30 years. Another day in the fight game, Teddy said to himself as the lock clicked open and the smell of sweat hit his nose. The inside of the gym looked like a museum of boxing history with pictures of legends covering every inch of the walls. Teddy walked through the empty gym and turned on the lights one by one while thinking about the thousands of fighters he had seen. He stopped at one picture and touched the frame gently, because it showed the night that changed boxing history forever. You were just a scared kid from Brooklyn who did not know how special you were back then, Teddy said to the picture. The front door opened and sunlight poured in around a large figure that stood there like a statue made of solid muscle. Mike walked into the gym with his hood covering his face and a black bag over his shoulder full of training gear. I thought you trained at that fancy new gym on the strip now with all the pretty equipment, Teddy said with surprise. I came back to where it all started because today I need to remember who I really am inside, Mike said softly. The 2 men stood there in silence for a moment because they both knew that something important was about to happen today. Teddy, there are men coming to kill me today, and I need you to trust me without asking any questions at all. Teddy did not look shocked at all because he had been around boxing long enough to know that danger followed champions everywhere. I have been waiting for someone to try something stupid for years now, Teddy said while pulling out a dusty shotgun from under the desk. Mike smiled for the first time that day because he knew he had come to the right place for what needed to happen. We have about 2 hours before they come looking for me, so we need to get some things ready, Mike said quickly. Tell me what you need and I will make sure those boys never forget the day they walked into my gym. The door opened again and Marcus walked in with both hands up high so everyone could see he had no weapons on him. Teddy swung the shotgun toward the door, and his old eyes got sharp and focused like a hawk looking at a mouse. He is with me, Teddy. Put the gun down before you give the man a heart attack standing here in your gym. I thought you were going to shoot me right there for a second and end my life before I could help you. The 3 men stood there looking at each other while the old gym seemed to breathe a sigh of relief around them. You took a big risk calling me this morning, and I do not forget when people put their lives on the line. Victor is a monster who has hurt too many people, and I cannot work for him anymore after what he said today. Will someone please tell an old man what is happening before I have another heart attack right here in my own gym? Victor Marchetti put a $2 million bounty on my head because I refused to throw my next fight for him. The color left Teddy's face and was replaced by a red anger that came from decades of hating crooked men in boxing. Victor has been poisoning this sport since before you were born, Mike, and it is time someone stopped him for good. That is exactly what I plan to do today. But first we need to deal with the men he sent to kill me. Marcus pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket and unfolded it to show a list of names written in black ink. These are the 5 men who took the job, and they are supposed to meet here at noon to collect your body. Mike studied the faces on the paper and memorized each one because he wanted to know exactly who was coming for him. 5 men against 1 does not seem like fair odds for them at all when I think about it, Mike said calmly. What do you mean it is not fair for them when they have guns and there are 5 of them coming here? Because I am not alone and I have friends that Victor does not know about who owe me some very big favors. Mike pressed the call button and waited only 2 seconds before a deep voice answered from somewhere far away across the city. It is time to collect what you owe me, and I need you at the old gym on Fremont Street right now. The voice on the other end spoke for 30 seconds. And then the line went dead without any goodbye or farewell. Mike put his phone back in his pocket and looked at the 2 men who were staring at him like he was crazy. Now I need to warm up before our guests arrive because I do not want to pull a muscle when things get interesting. Marcus could not believe what he was seeing as Mike walked calmly toward the heavy bag like this was a normal day. I have seen some crazy things in my 60 years on this earth, but this might be the craziest thing yet. Mike started to punch the heavy bag, and each hit sounded like a cannon going off inside the walls of the gym. His fists were like hammers made of bone and flesh, and the bag had no choice but to take the punishment. Marcus stepped back because he realized for the first time why people were so scared of this man standing before him. That is the Mike Tyson I remember from the old days when nobody in the world could stand in his way. The gym door opened again, and three massive shadows walked in like giants stepping out of a nightmare into the real world. The first man was tall and bald with scars on his face that told stories of wars fought in places with no names. You called and I came because a debt is a debt, and James Williams always pays what he owes to his friends. The second man had arms as thick as tree trunks and tattoos that covered every inch of skin from his neck down. I heard there is a party happening today, and Rico never misses a good party where things get broken and people get hurt. The third figure was a woman with hair like snow and eyes that looked like they had seen death many times. Mike saved my brother from a burning car 3 years ago, so today I return the favor by saving his life. Mike stopped hitting the bag and turned around to see the small army that had gathered to stand beside him today. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, because what happens today will change everything for a lot of people. James reached into his bag and pulled out a weapon that looked like it belonged in a war movie instead of a gym. What kind of friends do you have, Mike? Because these people look like they eat bullets for breakfast every morning. These are the kind of friends you make when you grow up in Brooklyn and learn that survival is the only thing that matters. The clock on the wall showed that only 30 minutes remained before the killers would arrive, and the real battle would begin. The 5 killers walked down Fremont Street with weapons hidden under their jackets and murder in their cold, dark hearts. Tony looked at his watch and saw that it was exactly 12 noon, which meant the time for killing had finally arrived. I can almost taste that money already sitting in my bank account waiting for me to spend it, Ricky said with excitement. Danny kept looking up at the buildings around them because he had learned long ago that death often came from above. Vince was sweating even though the day was not hot because his body knew that something very bad was about to happen. Jerome walked at the back of the group and he had not said a single word since they left the parking garage. The 5 men stopped in front of the gym and noticed that the street was completely empty, like everyone knew to stay away. All right, boys. We go in fast and we go in hard and we do not stop shooting until Tyson stops breathing forever. Wait a second, because something does not feel right about this whole situation if you ask me right now, Danny said quietly. You are scared of nothing, old man, so move out of my way before I take all the money for myself. Ricky shoved the door open and walked inside by himself, while the other 4 stood outside like statues frozen in place. The gym looked empty and quiet, and Ricky took 3 steps inside before he realized that he had made a terrible mistake. Oh no, Ricky whispered, as his brain finally understood what his eyes were seeing in the shadows all around him. Mike Tyson stepped out of the shadows with 5 warriors standing beside him like an army that had been waiting all morning. You must be the first one to die today because you were too stupid to wait for your friends to come inside. Ricky tried to pull out his knife, but his hands were shaking so hard that he could not grip the handle properly. Rico moved like a snake and grabbed Ricky's arm and twisted it until the knife fell to the floor with a clatter. My arm, you broke my arm, Ricky screamed as tears started to pour down his young face like a river of fear. The 4 men outside heard the scream, and Tony tried to run inside, but Danny grabbed him and pulled him back hard. Look up there on the roof because I just saw a flash of light like someone is watching us with a gun. Elena had moved to the roof across the street, and her rifle was pointed right at Tony's head waiting for him to move. This was supposed to be easy money, and now we are trapped like rats in a cage with no way out. Mike walked out of the gym by himself and stood on the sidewalk, looking at the 4 killers like they were small children. Victor sent you 5 to kill me and you could not even make it through the front door without losing one. I did not sign up for this, man. I just wanted some easy money. And now my friend is screaming inside your gym. Jerome finally moved and pulled out a gun and pointed it right at Mike's chest from only 15 feet away. Go ahead and shoot me if you think you are fast enough to pull that trigger before my friend on the roof. Jerome looked up and saw the tiny red dot dancing on his face, and he knew that his life was measured in seconds. This is not worth dying for, Jerome said as he let the gun drop from his hand and clatter on the concrete. Danny was smart enough to follow Jerome, and he threw his gun away like it was a poisonous snake biting his hand. I am not giving up to some washed-up boxer who thinks he is still the champion of the whole world. Mike took one step forward and Tony raised his gun. But then James appeared in the doorway with enough firepower to start a war. Tony spun around looking for any way to escape, but there was a gun pointed at him from every single direction. You can give me the gun and walk away from here today, or you can die on this dirty street for nothing. Just give him the gun, Tony, because I want to see my kids again, and this money is not worth our lives. Tony's hand was shaking so bad that the gun looked like it might go off by accident at any second now. The street was silent except for the sound of Tony's heavy breathing and the distant noise of cars on the highway. Mike took another step toward Tony, and now he was close enough to grab the gun if he wanted to try. Victor will kill us all if we do not finish this job today, Tony said with spit flying from his cracked lips. Mike moved faster than any human should be able to move, and his hand closed around the gun barrel like a vice. The gun twisted in a direction it was not meant to go, and Tony's finger broke with a crack that everyone could hear. Tony dropped to his knees and held his hand against his chest, while screaming words that made no sense to anyone. The other three men raised their hands as high as they could reach because they wanted no part of what just happened. You should have listened to your friend Big Sal, who was smart enough to go home to his family today. How do you know about Sal and what he said to us in the parking garage this morning before the job? I know everything that happens in this city because the walls have ears, and most of those ears belong to me. Marcus walked out of the gym and stood next to Mike, and the four men on the ground understood everything in that moment. You were Victor's man the whole time, but you have been working for Tyson and feeding him information all along. Victor is a monster who needed to be stopped, and Mike was the only person brave enough to try and stop him. What happens to us now because we failed to kill you, and Victor will come after our families if we run away? Mike looked at the four men on the ground and thought about what kind of lives they must have lived to end up here. James brought Ricky out of the gym with his arm wrapped up in a piece of cloth that was already turning red. You have two choices today, and I am only going to say them one time, so you better listen very carefully now. The five men looked at Mike like he was a judge about to decide if they would live or die today. Choice number one is you go back to Victor and tell him that you failed, and then he kills you and your families. All five men shook their heads fast, because they knew exactly what Victor would do to people who disappointed him badly. Choice number two is you help me take down Victor tonight, and then you get to start new lives somewhere else. The five men looked at each other without saying words because they were all thinking the same thing at the same time. Tony pushed himself up from the ground with his one good hand and faced Mike, like a man accepting his fate. We will help you take down Victor because that man has been destroying lives in this city for way too long. Mike reached out and helped Tony get fully to his feet, and in that moment a new alliance was born on Fremont Street. Everyone walked into the gym together, and the door closed behind them as the real planning for tonight began in secret. The inside of the old gym now looked like a military headquarters, with maps and guns covering every flat surface in sight. Victor runs his entire operation from the 30th floor of the Golden Palace Casino on the south end of the Strip. The blueprint showed every room and hallway on the 30th floor, including the location of all the guards and cameras. Getting up to that floor will not be easy because Victor has at least 20 armed guards between the lobby and his office. The security room is on the 5th floor, and if we take that out first, we can blind all the cameras at once. That will only give us about 3 minutes before backup power kicks in, and the cameras come back online automatically. 3 minutes was not enough time to get from the 5th floor to the 30th floor and take out Victor's guards. What if we do not go up from the bottom, but instead we come down from the top of the building? All the people in the room turned to look at the old gym owner who had been quiet until this very moment. I know a pilot who owes me money, and he has a helicopter that can land on the roof of that building. We come in from the roof while they are looking at the front door like a bunch of fools waiting for nothing. The room came alive with new energy as everyone realized that this crazy plan might actually work if they did it right. How do we get to the helicopter without Victor's people seeing us and reporting back to him before we even leave? I have some disguises in my bag that will make us look like a catering crew delivering food for a party tonight. The bag was full of white chef coats and tall hats that would make them look like innocent workers instead of killers. Nobody is going to believe that I am a chef bringing food, because everyone in this city knows my face too well. I spent 5 years in Russian theater before I became what I am now, and I can make anyone look like anyone else. Elena walked toward Mike with her kit open, and Mike took a step back because he did not like the look in her eyes. Everyone in the room started laughing at the heavyweight champion of the world being scared of a woman with makeup brushes. Fine, but if you make me look stupid, I will never forgive you for as long as I live on this earth. Elena started working on Mike's face with tools and materials that seemed to appear from nowhere like magic tricks. The clock showed that they had 8 hours to prepare for the most dangerous night that any of them had ever faced. Back at the Golden Palace Casino, Victor was pacing behind his desk with a phone pressed hard against his ear. What do you mean they have not reported in yet, because it has been over 6 hours since they left this morning? The young assistant by the door looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world, except in this room right now. Victor threw the phone across the room and it exploded against the wall into 100 pieces of plastic and glass. The assistant ducked down low as the phone pieces flew past his head and landed all over the red carpet. 5 men could not kill one washed-up boxer who spends more time talking on television than he does in the ring. Sir, there is something else you should know about what happened today on Fremont Street near the old boxing gym. Victor turned to face his assistant with a look that had made grown men wet themselves in fear many times before. Our people on the street say that Marcus Webb was seen walking into the gym with Tyson like they were friends. Victor stood perfectly still for 10 seconds, and the room seemed to get smaller and darker with each passing moment. Are you telling me that my own head of security has been working for Mike Tyson this whole time behind my back? That is what our sources are saying, sir. And I thought you would want to know as soon as possible today. Victor walked to the window and stared out at the city that he had controlled for over 30 years of his life. I built this empire from nothing, and I will not let some punk from Brooklyn take it away from me tonight. Victor turned around and pointed at his assistant with a finger that had ordered the deaths of many people over the years. Call every man we have in this city and tell them to come to the casino tonight for double their normal pay. The assistant wrote down the orders as fast as he could, because he knew that mistakes would not be forgiven tonight. Victor walked to a painting on the wall and pushed it aside to reveal a safe that nobody else knew about. His fingers moved across the dial like a piano player, and the safe opened to show stacks of money and a golden gun. Victor pulled out the golden gun that he had received as a gift from a dead drug lord many years ago. If Mike Tyson wants a war, then I will give him a war that he will never forget for the rest of his life. The assistant stood frozen because he had never seen his boss like this before, and it scared him more than anything. Get out of here and make those calls before I decide that you knew about Marcus and chose not to tell me. The assistant ran out of the room so fast that he almost fell, and Victor was left alone with his weapon. Victor sat down at his desk and placed the golden gun in front of him and stared at it like it was a friend. You and I have ended many problems together over the years, and tonight we will end the biggest problem of all. At 10 o'clock that night, a black helicopter landed on a building across the street from Victor's casino tower. Mike climbed out of the helicopter and he looked nothing like himself, because Elena had turned him into a different man. His face had a fake beard, and his eyes were now green instead of brown, and he wore a wig of gray hair. The rest of the team climbed out wearing white chef coats and carrying boxes that said Vegas Premier Catering on the sides. The group moved fast across the roof toward the fire escape that would take them down to street level. Team 2 is in position at the security room and waiting for the signal to cut power to the cameras. Elena looked at her watch and counted down the seconds until it was time to begin the most dangerous part of the plan. Tonight, we end Victor's reign of terror and show him that nobody can put a price on a human life, Mike whispered. The team moved down the metal stairs one by one and disappeared into the darkness between the buildings like ghosts. They walked out of the alley and crossed the street toward the back entrance of the Golden Palace Casino like workers. A bored security guard stood at the service door looking at papers and not really watching who was coming inside. Rico walked up to the guard with his biggest smile and a box of what looked like very expensive desserts. "Yeah, the party on 30 ordered a lot of food tonight, so go on up," the guard said without looking at anyone. The team walked through the door and into a kitchen that was full of real workers preparing food for the casino. Mike walked through the kitchen with his head down, and not a single person recognized the most famous face in boxing. The service elevator opened, and the team stepped inside and pressed the button for floor 30, where Victor was waiting. The elevator started going up, and everyone opened their boxes to check the weapons that were hidden under the fake food. The numbers on the display kept climbing higher and higher, and everyone's heart beat faster with each floor that passed. The elevator stopped 2 floors early, and the doors started to open, and everyone inside stopped breathing for one long moment. A guard in a black suit stepped into the elevator and looked confused at all the people in chef coats. The guard's eyes got smaller as he looked at the team, and his hand started to reach for his weapon. James moved like lightning and grabbed the guard from behind and put his hand over the man's mouth before he could scream. The guard's eyes went wide and then closed as James squeezed his neck in a way that put him to sleep. The team put the sleeping guard in the corner of the elevator and tied him up so he could not cause problems. The doors closed and the elevator started moving again toward the 30th floor, where the real danger was waiting for them. Mike's disguised eyes showed something that had not been there before, and it was the look of a man ready to fight. The elevator reached the top and the bell dinged and the doors opened to reveal a hallway full of armed men. 12 men in black suits stood in the hallway with their guns pointed right at the elevator doors that had just opened. "Nobody move or we will shoot every single one of you right here in this hallway without asking any questions first." Mike stepped forward with his hands shaking like a scared old chef and his box of food held out in front of him. "Please do not shoot us, sir, because we are just here to deliver the food for the party that was ordered today." The lead guard looked at his clipboard and saw that there was indeed a large food order scheduled for tonight at 10. The paper showed everything that Rico had faked earlier that day when he called the casino pretending to be a party planner. The guards started to relax and their guns went down a little bit as the team walked out into the bright hallway. James moved to the left side of the hallway like he was making room for the others to pass by with their boxes. Elena counted the guards and noted where each one was standing so she would know exactly who to shoot first. "Wait a minute, because there is something about your face that does not look right to me, old man," the guard said. The guard's fingers touched Mike's beard and felt that it was not real hair but something glued to his skin. Time seemed to stop as everyone in the hallway understood that the next second would change everything for all of them. Mike tore the fake beard off his face, and his real eyes burned with a fire that made the guard step backward. Mike's fist shot forward faster than anyone could see, and it connected with the guard's jaw with a sound like thunder. The guard's head snapped back and his body flew through the air and crashed into 2 other guards behind him. The hallway exploded into chaos as the team threw down their boxes and pulled out the guns that were hidden inside. James fired his rifle twice, and 2 guards fell to the ground before they could even raise their own weapons to shoot. Elena had a gun in each hand, and she fired them both at the same time, and 2 more guards went down hard. Rico grabbed a guard and threw him against the wall so hard that the wall cracked, and the man stopped moving completely. Mike moved through the remaining guards like a storm, destroying everything in its path, and no one could stand against him. His fists were like hammers from heaven, and each punch put another man on the ground where he belonged tonight. The last guard dropped his weapon and put his hands up high because he wanted to live to see another day. "Tell Victor that Mike Tyson is here to collect what he owes me, and I am not leaving until I get it." The guard ran toward Victor's office to deliver the message, while the team gathered themselves and prepared for the final fight. Marcus kicked open a door to a side room and found 5 more guards inside who were hiding and waiting for orders. "You boys can either put down your guns and walk out of here, or you can die in this room tonight." The 5 guards looked at the destruction in the hallway and decided that Victor was not worth dying for tonight. Danny collected all the guns from the guards and threw them into a pile far away from anyone who might use them. Tony picked up a rifle with his one good hand, and even though he was hurt, he was ready to finish this job. The team walked down the hallway, stepping over the bodies of the men who had tried to stop them from reaching Victor. At the end of the hallway stood 2 large doors with gold handles that led to the office where Victor was hiding. "Whatever happens in there, I want you all to know that I could not have done this without each of you." The team nodded back at Mike, because they all knew that this moment was bigger than any of them alone. Mike pushed both doors open and bright light poured out into the hallway, and there sat Victor behind his big desk. Victor stood behind his desk with his golden gun pointed at the door, and 3 of his best men at his side. "You should have taken my offer to throw the fight, Mike, because now you have to die in my office tonight." Mike walked into the office like he owned it, and his eyes never left Victor's face for even one single second. "You put a bounty on my head, Victor, and now I am here to show you why that was a very bad idea." The team spread out across the office and pointed their guns at Victor's guards, who looked nervous and ready to run. "You think you have won just because you beat up some guards in my hallway like a common street thug? I have been running this city since before you were born, and one boxer is not going to change that tonight." Mike took another step toward Victor, and now he was close enough to see the sweat running down the old man's face. "You want to know why your men could never find anything on me that you could use to control me, Victor?" Victor's face twisted with confusion because he had spent years trying to find dirt on Mike, and always came up empty. Mike reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather wallet that he threw onto Victor's desk with a soft thud. The wallet fell open, and inside was a shiny gold badge that said FBI and an ID card with Mike's real name. Every person in the room stared at the badge, like it was a bomb that had just landed on Victor's desk. "That is not possible because you have been a boxer your whole life and everyone knows who you really are. The FBI recruited me when I was 18 years old, and everything since then has been part of a bigger plan. I have been building a case against you for 12 years, Victor, and tonight I finally have everything I need to end you." Victor knocked over his chair as he backed away from the desk, and his eyes darted around looking for a way out. The 3 guards dropped their guns and raised their hands because fighting a boxer was one thing, but fighting the FBI was different. "You cowards will stand there and let this man destroy everything we have built together over all these years? I am not going to prison for the rest of my life for you, Victor, so you are on your own now." Victor watched his last loyal men walk out of the office and leave him standing alone against an army of enemies. "If I am going down, then I am taking you with me, you lying piece of garbage from the streets of Brooklyn." Victor pulled the trigger, but the gun only clicked because someone had removed all the bullets without him knowing about it. "I took those out of your safe this morning when you were yelling on the phone like you always do, Victor." Victor threw the useless gun at Mike, who caught it with one hand, and then Victor fell to his knees like a broken man. Mike stood over the man who had tried to kill him and felt nothing but pity for how far he had fallen. "Please, Mike, I can give you money and power and anything else you want, if you just let me walk away tonight. There is nothing you have that I want, Victor, except to see you pay for all the lives you have destroyed." The handcuffs clicked around Victor's wrists, and the sound was like music to everyone in the room who had waited for this. Mike pulled Victor up from the floor, and the team gathered around to see the monster who had terrorized the city finally caught. "This is Ghost calling all units. We have the target in custody, and we need cleanup crews on the 30th floor now." Elena put her guns away, and for the first time that night she let herself believe that they had actually done it. "We just took down the biggest crime boss in Las Vegas, and I did not even mess up my hair doing it. The elevator opened, and a team of real FBI agents came out to take control of the scene and collect evidence. 12 years of undercover work finally paid off tonight. Agent Tyson and the whole bureau is proud of what you did. I could not have done it without my team, and they deserve just as much credit as I do tonight. Victor was led toward the elevator by two agents, and he did not look up once as he walked past all his enemies. The man who had put a bounty on Mike Tyson's head was now just another criminal on his way to a prison cell. Outside the casino, the street was filled with police cars and FBI vans and hundreds of people watching the show unfold. We are here live at the Golden Palace Casino, where FBI agents have just arrested Victor Marchetti on dozens of charges. People in bars all over the city watched their televisions and could not believe what they were seeing happening tonight. Mike walked out the front door of the casino, and 100 cameras started flashing, like a lightning storm had arrived. He walked through the crowd of reporters without saying a word because he knew that his actions spoke louder than anything. Mike, is it true that you have been an FBI agent this whole time while also being the heavyweight champion? Mike stopped for just 1 second and looked at the reporter, and the smile on his face said everything that needed saying. A black truck pulled up to the curb, and Mike walked toward it while the reporters kept shouting questions at his back. He opened the door and looked back at the Golden Palace Casino one last time before climbing inside to join his team. Inside the truck, everyone sat in silence for a moment because they were too tired to celebrate what they had just done. I have seen a lot of crazy things in my life, but tonight was the craziest thing I will ever see. I spent 3 years pretending to work for that monster, and now I can finally sleep without nightmares every single night. I tried to kill you this morning, and you still gave me a chance to be something better than a hired gun. We all make bad choices when we are desperate. But what matters is what we do when we get a second chance. The truck drove down the famous Las Vegas Strip, and all the lights and sounds seemed brighter and louder than ever before. Mike watched the city pass by outside his window and thought about all the years he had spent living two different lives. What will you do now that Victor is gone and you do not have to pretend to be someone else anymore? I think I will keep boxing for a while because I really do love the sport, even if it was also my cover. The truck turned off the main road and headed toward a quieter part of the city where the real world waited. The next morning, the sun rose over Fremont Street, and the old boxing gym stood quiet and proud like it always had. Teddy unlocked the door to his gym just like he did every morning, and the smell of sweat and leather welcomed him home. Another day in the fight game, he said to himself, just like he always did when he opened the door each morning. The gym looked the same as it always did, but somehow everything felt different now that the world knew the truth. Mike walked in wearing his training clothes and carrying his bag like it was just another normal day at the gym. I thought you would be on every television show in the world today talking about what happened last night at the casino. I spent 12 years pretending to be famous, and now I just want to be a regular person who loves to box. The tape went around his hands the same way it had 1,000 times before, and the feeling calmed his busy mind. Mike walked to the heavy bag and stood in front of it like a man about to have a conversation with an old friend. Teddy climbed into the boxing ring and sat down on a stool in the corner where he had sat for 40 years. Mike threw his first punch of the day, and the sound echoed through the empty gym like a heartbeat coming back to life. For the next hour, Mike trained like he always did, and Teddy watched like he always had, and nothing else mattered. The door opened and Marcus walked in carrying a newspaper with a huge headline that everyone in the city had already seen. The headline was bigger than any headline about any fight Mike had ever won in his entire boxing career. You are the most famous person in the whole world right now, and you are in here hitting a bag like nothing happened. The newspaper will be old news tomorrow, but this bag will still be here waiting for me to hit it again. The three men stood in the gym that had seen so much history, and they knew they had just made some more. The door opened again, and the 5 men who had tried to kill Mike yesterday walked in looking nervous and hopeful. You said if we helped you take down Victor, we could have new lives, and we are here to find out what that means. Mike walked over to the men who had been his enemies just 1 day ago, and he shook Tony's good hand. Nobody has ever given me a second chance before in my whole life, and I do not know how to thank you. This gym needs trainers and security guards and people who know what it is like to fight for survival every day." Danny looked around the old gym, and for the first time in years, he saw a future that did not involve hurting people. Jerome smiled for the first time since anyone could remember, and the expression made him look like a completely different person. Everyone gathered in the center of the gym and looked at each other like people who had survived something impossible together. "Well, if you boys are going to work here, then you better learn how to wrap your hands the right way first. Because in this gym, we do things the proper way, or we do not do them at all, and that is final." The 5 men sat down like students on the first day of school, and Teddy began to teach them everything he knew. Mike went back to his heavy bag and started hitting it again because that was what fighters did no matter what. Each punch was a reminder that the work never stopped, and that being good at something required doing it every single day. 3 months later, the trial of Victor Marchetti began in a federal courthouse under bright spring sunshine and clear blue skies. Victor walked into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit with chains on his wrists and ankles like the criminal he was. The man who had once controlled Las Vegas now looked like a ghost of himself, with no power left at all. The courtroom was filled with reporters and lawyers and regular people who wanted to see justice happen with their own eyes. Mike sat in the witness chair wearing a dark suit, and he looked at Victor without any hate or fear. "Agent Tyson, can you please tell the court what you witnessed during your 12 years undercover in Victor Marchetti's organization?" Mike began to speak, and his words painted a picture of crime and corruption that went deeper than anyone had imagined. The jury listened to every word, and some of them wrote things down while others just stared in shock at the truth. Victor watched the man who had destroyed his empire tell the world about every terrible thing he had ever done. "Victor Marchetti ordered the deaths of at least 15 people that I know about, and probably many more that I never saw." The courtroom gasped, and the sound of pens scratching on paper filled the air as reporters wrote down every word. The judge banged her gavel and called for quiet, so the trial could continue and the truth could keep coming out. 2 weeks later, the jury came back into the courtroom, and everyone held their breath waiting to hear what they had decided. The foreman stood up and unfolded a piece of paper that held the fate of Victor Marchetti in a few simple words. Victor stared at the man holding the paper, and for once in his life, he had no control over what would happen. "We, the jury, find the defendant Victor Marchetti guilty on all 47 counts, including murder and racketeering and corruption." The courtroom exploded with noise, and Victor collapsed in his chair, like all the air had been sucked out of him. Mike stood in the back of the courtroom and watched the man who had tried to kill him learn that he had lost. "Victor Marchetti, I hereby sentence you to 7 consecutive life terms in federal prison, without any possibility of parole ever." Victor was led out of the courtroom in chains, and he never looked back because there was nothing left to see. Mike walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunshine, and a wall of reporters blocked his path forward. "Mike, what does this verdict mean to you after spending 12 years of your life bringing this man to justice today?" Mike stopped and looked at the crowd of faces and cameras, and he thought about everything that had led to this moment. "It means that no one is above the law, and that the people who hurt others will always have to pay eventually." Mike walked away from the reporters toward a waiting truck, and he did not answer any more questions, because none were needed. The door opened and Teddy was inside waiting for Mike with a smile that said, "Everything without using any words at all." Mike climbed in and sat down, and for the first time in 12 years, he felt like he could finally breathe again. The truck drove away from the courthouse, and all the cameras and noise faded away into the distance behind them. Mike and Teddy rode in silence, because some moments were too big for words, and this was one of them. So what happens now that the bad guy is in prison, and you do not have to be a secret agent anymore? Mike watched the city pass by outside his window, and thought about all the possibilities that were now open to him. "I think I will keep doing what I have always done, Teddy, which is fight and train and try to be better." The truck headed toward the old gym on Fremont Street, where it had all started, and where it would continue forever. Mike loosened his tie because he was ready to take off the suit and put on his training clothes and hit the bag. Because at the end of the day, I am just a fighter from Brooklyn who found a way to make a difference. Mike stepped out of the truck and walked toward the gym door, and Teddy followed right behind him like always. The door swung open, and the smell of the gym hit Mike like a warm hug from an old friend. And tomorrow I will wake up and do it all over again because that is what champions do until they cannot anymore. Inside the gym, the men who had once tried to kill each other were now training together like brothers in arms. Mike joined the group and put on his gloves and got ready to train because the work was never really done. The sound of fists hitting leather filled the gym, and outside the sun set on a city that was a little bit safer. The old gym on Fremont Street stood proud against the orange sky, and inside the champions of tomorrow were being made today. And somewhere in a prison cell far away, Victor Marchetti sat alone, knowing that he had lost to a man he never understood.